Um, I lost myself again in here.
Oh.
I'm Maurice, and my partners Angelo and Jessica. We put together a slideshow for you today on the challenges of end of life and addiction, and it's been a very enjoyable trek for us, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, we'll start with our introduction. Untreated alcoholics and addiction suffer the same fate as any other person with a terminal illness. Unfortunately, there is much more social stigma on how society looks upon an alcoholic or addict's death. People interpret that alcoholism and addiction are nothing more than a bad habit. The alcoholic addict's lack of willpower hinders the social structure and a strain on the healthcare system. At a glance, this perspective appears completely logical. I know I saw it that way myself, and I suffer from alcoholism. I vowed it could never happen to me, yet I drank with a passion for 35 years, and then the following 10 years turned into alcoholic insanity. My whole life became governed by alcohol, every breathing moment. I had to decide whether to drink or die. A time for change was upon me. I admitted defeat and reached out for help and placed myself in care of a detox and rehab center. I have been abstinent for almost 6 years now and follow a lifelong recovery program. The truth is, addictive behavior is a disease like any other, must be viewed on a holistic open-mindedness, and must be treated or death is imminent. Addiction is a self-defeating disease and has a mind of its own. It takes control of a person, biopsychosocial, and will become a person's friend, God, and lover, unlike any other disease. It is a self-manifested and manipulative lie. Just maybe it's time for a change and a new perspective view on these demeaning diseases. Addiction is defined as a chronic relapsing brain disease that is characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use, despite harmful consequences. It is considered a brain disease because drugs change the brain. They change its structure and how it works. These brain changes can be long lasting and can lead to many harmful, often destructive behaviors. Addiction prevention. Addiction prevention is the key to stopping the cycle of addiction recurring throughout the family and social structure. Therefore, preventing the addictive behavior from becoming terminal illness and death. Education, we feel that we should educate children and adolescents of parents with addictive behaviors and teach them before the disease spreads. Getting the message across early to our youth through the school system and awareness programs will aid them to recognize that there may be an environmental issue within the home or outside the home environment. Whether it is drug addiction, eating disorders, or alcoholism, they can all become terminal and death is the end result. The mobile effect. A person suffering from addiction can throw everyone off balance. The family members and friends are shamed by social stigma and stereotypes, domestic violence and abuse, constant broken promises, the deterioration of a healthy family living, and poor family environment and homelessness. In the workplace, tardiness and absence, poor work ethics and productivity, bad relations among peers, abusive, serious accidents occur, a person becomes the broken link and jobless. In the medical field, addicts lie to get what they want. They're uncooperative and irrational, abuse medication, refuse medication, and unclear information gets poor diagnosis and treatment. In the law enforcement, police officers are abused, legal systems become congested, and overcrowding of jails. This illness has no boundaries. The phase of addiction, also known as the death spiral. The first use can arrive at any given time and place and for many different reasons. Family reunions and weddings, Thanksgiving dinner and Christmas, the death of a loved one or ending of a relationship, social stressors. The first use can arrive in a joyous and natural sad times. The first use can also arrive from very traumatic events. Sexual abuse, mental, physical abuse, children and adults reared by substance users, war, or any traumatic event causing post-traumatic stresses. It is not the very first use that scares me, it is where it leads to. And here we have the phases of addiction. And in the progressive stage, this is where a person is more or less experimenting for the first time. And whether they like it or not, some may reject it and some may just think it's God's gift. And unfortunately, the progressive stage, if a person continues use, they develop a tolerance to it, and it takes more and more alcohol to get that ultimate high that they are searching for. And then we run into the crucial phase. And in this phase, a person starts developing bad habits once in a while. And family and friends begin to notice that the person is starting to show signs of self-destructive behaviors. And but at this point, the person is not aware, but continues to party on and thinks life is joyous, happy, and free. And then we hit the chronic phase where a person starts to spiral down rapidly. Their tolerances increase massively, and the consumption of alcohol persists. And they become very disoriented. In this phase, they may experience their first blackouts and create personality issues. They may begin starting to isolate, and other phases such as that. The chronic phase, this phase is what they call the death spiral. You see that knot at the bottom? That is where a person gets in a cycle. They want to quit, but they can't. The alcohol has a complete control of their mind. Obsession to get a drink is in their mind, and day in and day out, it is what rules their life. And rehabilitation phase and recovery, I will discuss this on our next slide. Okay, the stages of behavioral change. It all begins with denial. And this is where a person does not see that they have a problem. There's just no way. And if you point it out to them that they have a problem, they'll throw it right back in your face. They just consider that they're on top of the world, and the pros outweigh the cons at this stage of their addiction. And this is called the pre-contemplation stage. So we also move on to the contemplation stage, where a person is ambivalent and conflicting emotions. They begin to realize, there just might be a problem here, and they're emotionally unbalanced. They argue with themselves, yes, maybe no, I have a problem, and they seem to want to do something about it. So they may begin experimenting. The preparation, experiment with small changes and collect information about change. Here they are seriously realizing that they have a problem. They want to change, and they're going to look into it. They make small goals, like I'm not going to drink every day of the week. I'll just drink on weekends or at weddings. And this goes on to no avail. The cycle just keeps repeating itself, and they finally realize help is what they need. Then a person takes action. direct action to achieve a goal. They take bigger steps here, and they are definitely getting involved in their recovery. They want to know more, they seek more information, look for more help, and they start feeling better about themselves. They realize that the morning drink isn't necessary to feel better. Abstinence is a way out. And maintenance, a person develops a daily maintenance of themselves. Heck, they might start brushing their teeth once in a while for a change, or washing. Instead of once a month, they might have a shower twice a month to begin with, or cleaning the house. But maintenance leads to success. And as you see at the top here, we're doing a little dance, but this dance can be prematurely if a person does not have a relapse prevention program. Stage of change continued, lapse and relapse. A lapse is a situation where a person may accidentally pick up a drink and bring it to their face and maybe have a sip even, and it's completely accidental. And even like it can occur just out of old habit. I've found myself at a family reunion once with a beer in my hand and not realizing it. Thank God I realized it, and I never proceeded with pursuing to have a drink of it, and I put it down and just wrote it off as a slip. This is also causes slip, by the way. And a relapse is when a person actually takes a drink. It could be accidental, but then continues to drink and says, hell with it, I'm just going to drink tonight and then I'll be off tomorrow. And this relapse could be, he may have just thrown away his whole progress of abstinence. So, unfortunately, relapse does occur in the process of change and is not the end of the world. Relapse can be nothing more than a minor setback and will become a useful tool in a person's recovery. Being a failure is the furthest thing from the truth. Don't be afraid to ask yourself questions. How did I get here? What did I learn from this experience? Can I prevent it from happening again? Is there help out there? Relapse can improve awareness of vulnerability. A person will realize she is playing with their life and take the lessons seriously. Or a person may become ambivalent and start experimenting again, or fall back into the denial stage of behavior. Well, welcome to the relapse prevention. A well-structured relapse prevention plan, RPP, can and will guide a person towards a healthy, joyous, and meaningful lifestyle. An RPP is a holistic plan put together between clinician, family, friends, workplace, and most importantly, the client. RPP is client-centered. Addiction is a lifelong disease. Therefore, an RPP is a lifelong program. It is versatile and can be tweaked as needed throughout the client's life. Without an RPP, a client is living with one foot in the grave. There are 12-step programs for all walks of life, such as Alcoholics Anonymous, chemical dependency program centers, social support systems, one-on-one or group counseling. Never forget that addiction is an opportunist and it watches you. Learn to recognize triggers, people, places, and things that may draw you in. It's your life. What are you going to do about it?
So there is a lot of shame, guilt, and stigma that surrounds addiction of any kind. It can feel quite debilitating and usually makes that cycle even worse for the person who's stuck in addiction. The shame, guilt, and stigma will just make them want to use more and more despite the negative consequences. Um, those struggling the most are often pushed away by friends, family, and society. They're often labeled as toxic people. Even though individuals who suffer with addiction are only human too, often with extensive traumas, they don't always get treated with the same kindness and dignity as those who don't suffer the same issues. I apologize for the background noise. I have kids and dogs in here.
That's
So
okay.
some CAMH facts and statistics. In any given year, 1 in 5 Canadians experience a mental illness or addiction problem. People who use alcohol and other substances who are over the age of 40 are now more likely to die of a non-drug related cause than people who use substances under the age of 40. This population will therefore potentially need greater access to palliative and end-of-life care services. People with mental illness and addictions are more likely to die prematurely than the general population. Mental illness can cut 10 to 20 years from a person's life expectancy. Substance abuse is connected to many health issues such as lung or heart disease, mental illness, lowered immune systems, and cancer. According to the American Cancer Society, substance abuse and addiction make up about 30% of all cancer deaths. Tobacco, for example, is linked to 80% of all lung cancer deaths. There's also strong evidence showing that alcohol consumption can lead to various types of cancer, with most being a form of oral, liver, and colon cancer. And then there's the ripple effect. For every one person with addiction, there's all their family members, their friends, any loved ones. The Canadian Institute for Health Information demonstrates that alcohol-related hospitalizations and deaths are on the rise, with 10 Canadians dying in hospital every day due to harm from substance use, with 75% of those deaths directly related to alcohol use. The ripple effect of all of that, all of those people consumed by losses whose lives today are forever altered because of a loved one's accidental or preventable death. It's a wonder our society can even function.
Maslow's hierarchy. This is a chart for self-care. So when we starting at the bottom, when your physiological needs. So your air, your water, your food, shelter, sleep, clothing, and reproduction. Those being your needs that progress on to the needs that are higher on the chart. So your safety needs are personal security, employment, resources, health, and property. Then you have love and belonging, which is friendship, intimacy, family, and a sense of connection. Up above that is your esteem, so your respect, self esteem, status, recognition, strength, and freedom. And then your self actualization, so your desire to become the most that you can be. Self care for addictions and mental health can cause many issues within burnout. So basically, burning your candle at both ends. And it is extremely important that addicts and mental health clients or residents have proper self care in order to maintain their own mental health to prevent burnout. Burning the candle at both ends. Taking care of one's own personal needs, such as sleep, food, shelter, self esteem, and being self aware of one's own needs and their environment they are in. It is important to know when to take a step back and look at oneself, figuring out what can help with managing stress and coping mechanisms to deal with them. Such coping skills are going for walks, following a daily routine, reading books, listening to music, crafting, talking to someone you can trust, journaling and finding hobbies that interest you, and a version of meditation that fits into your individual life. Self-care for addictions and mental health. So taking care of yourself is not selfish. Taking care of oneself is often viewed as a selfish act, but there's a huge difference between being selfish and practicing self-care. Learning to love and care for yourself is one of the most challenging things you will ever do. But having compassion, patience, and love for yourself is a cornerstone of getting and staying sober. Regardless of where you are on your journey to living a sober life, self care should be an essential part of your routine. So, one would be staying mindful, which means being aware of yourself, your surroundings. Two is connect with other people in recovery. So, in Alcoholics Anonymous or in NA, they usually have a person you can go to talk to if you're having issues or problems, or you can talk to other people within the group, and that helps you stay balanced. And that leads to finding balance in your life. So between your work and your social life and your house life, just finding balance between all of that in order to keep going. Taking time to be with yourself. So again, going for walks, reading, journaling, doing things for yourself, and then setting healthy boundaries. So letting, other people know what your boundaries are so that other people don't cross that line and cause issues within your own mind. Self-care for end of life is usually provided by loved ones or certified staff. Most self-care at this point is directed more toward nurses, W, and well, does self-care mean? The idea of relentless self-care is well known to those in the pastoral Christian care field, and it's important and practice standards in which self-care defined by Sherman as a self-initiated behavior that people choose to incorporate to promote good health and general well-being. Despite this health promoting emphasis on good health and well-being, the palliative care literature focuses largely on coping strategies in the context of occupational stressors such as burnout or compassion fatigue. Where did my mouse go? There you are. So the challenges of self-care and end of life. At the end of life, self-care no longer is viable to do for oneself, but rather must rely on others to do self-care for you. It is most definitely challenging at this point in the client's care. Not saying that self-care is not achievable, but rather it must be provided by others such as PSWs, nurses, RPNs, and homemakers. This is also where a hospice or long-term care home or in-home assistance in daily living would be the best interest of the resident or client so that their needs can be taken care of.
So the challenges of end of life with addiction. Um, the barriers that could affect the individuals with end of life support may include not being able to access health services when they're not allowed to use drugs or alcohol, additional health problems caused by drugs and alcohol, not having family and friends around them to support them, that shame, guilt, and stigma, burnt bridges, the fear of being judged or stigmatized by professionals involved in their care, difficulty managing symptoms if the drugs or alcohol they use interact with their medicines, having a blood-borne virus, for example, HIV or hepatitis, acquired through injecting drug use. When someone in the family has had an addiction, that addiction has affected the whole family system. So our actions affect the rest of the family unit, and it changes the dynamic of those relationships. Shame is a very powerful force in the emotional process for families of addiction. It's particularly challenging in families of addiction where death is occurring. The individual might feel ashamed that they're terminally ill, perhaps even responsible. End of life care for families of addictions is like an overlay. Someone is dying and receiving end of life care, and that affects the whole family. Now we add the issues related to that family dealing with addiction. You compound or even accelerate some of the issues that take place in this end of life care setting. It automatically becomes a more complex situation. There's also the challenges for the caretakers, something like when it hits close to home for the workers. It's quite common for hospice team members and addiction workers to have a high incidence of addiction within their own family unit. This makes sense as many of those who go into a caregiving profession were inspired or driven by their own personal or family history of addiction and or mental illness. It's important to recognize that this changes the dynamic of the professional relationship. Caregivers may be more likely to project some of their own thoughts and feelings onto the patients, the family, or the situation as a whole, and that can skew the way treatment is handled. It may even mean the issues of addiction are not recognized or addressed. It's important to recognize that issues may arise among families with a history of addiction in end-of-life care that wouldn't arise among families without such a history. For one, the introduction of any number of regulated substances into the household can become a concern. With end-of-life care, controlled substances are common since the goal is achieving comfort for the individual who is dying. For a family with a history of addiction, the family may say that the patient is or was an addict and that introducing controlled substances could jeopardize the patient's recovery. But that could also mean they don't receive the right amount of medication to ease their suffering. It's one of the many examples showing how addiction can skew end-of-life care. So here's a table showing the many challenges and the outcome, the desired outcome of, the challenging outcome of end-of-life care with addiction. So there's a lack of formalized knowledge. Either you specialize in palliative care or addiction, or one or the other, but it's rare to find someone that specializes in all of it, or a place that specializes in all of it at once. There's the stigma, like we said, compartmentalization of healthcare, same thing, the lack of formalized knowledge. And the patient characteristics, there's multiple problems. So there's end-of-life care, there's addiction, there could be health problems brought on by natural aging, there could be health problems brought on by the addiction. There's limited communication, perhaps from the family members, the friends, and perhaps the person themselves. You know, if there's just many different obstacles there. There's ethical dilemmas. You know, if there's bias, if someone has grown up in the same type of environment, they might have that bias where it hits close to home and they just refuse to work with someone of, you know, from this background or what have you. And the outcome of all those challenges could be late identification of palliative care phase, need for an education and a team of expertise that would all work together to all specialize in that as a whole, addiction and end of life as a whole. And care for the caregivers needs to be really up there. That's a lot to put on their plate. They're dealing with a lot. They're in, the lack of communication, all that. It can be quite exhausting trying to figure out what best is for these clients. So the stages of grieving a loved one's addiction are the same as grieving a loved one's death. Even some people grieve their loved ones long before they've passed, just because of the progress of their addiction. So the first stage of grief is denial and isolation. So family members may have already been grieving the loss of a loved one even before they have reached end of life. They may deny the reality of the situation. There's the anger and guilt that comes after that. Loved ones' anger may be aimed at other family members, complete strangers, or directly toward their loved ones dealing with the addiction. Angry outbursts leave people feeling guilty, which can produce anger all over again and become a cycle. Then comes the bargaining stage. Addiction can create absolute chaos, leaving loved ones feeling helpless, vulnerable, and at a loss for what to do. Family members often resort to desperate attempts to regain control without making any real changes in their lives. For example, they often wish, if only I had been a better partner or parent or friend, instead of admitting that their loved one needs true help, like true professional help. This can also be known as a codependent relationship, where we'll just do anything in our power to try to stop the addiction, but we can't. Then sets in the depression. Sadness and hopelessness are two prominent emotions of the family and friends of a person addicted to drugs or alcohol. In hopelessness, we feel that hope is expired for our loved one, and we need to prepare to bid them farewell. In the final stage of grieving, we have acceptance. Although not everyone reaches the stages of acceptance, some may never be able to see beyond their anger or denial. Acceptance does not mean we feel happy and that everything's going great. Acceptance is when a loved one gives themselves the opportunity to make their own peace and find their own personal calm. So here we just have how you could support a loved one dealing with end of life and addiction. Accepting that your loved one's addiction is not your fault is crucial to the family's healing. I've heard of the 3 C's. You didn't cause it, you can't cure it, and you can't control it. It's really all about where the person who's in the addiction wants to go with it. The family can't do really anything about it. Seeking support for the loved ones, so Al-Anon, ACOA, otherwise known as Adult Children of Alcoholics, or other support groups or one-on-one therapy can all aid in how we support the individual with addiction and reestablish family connections. It also helps with accepting the addiction for what it is, and just learning to let go of resentments, stuff like that. Just education for the loved ones about addiction as the disease model can help gain a different perspective into what our loved one with the addiction is going through. Always try to be empathetic and open-minded. Nobody grows up thinking, I can't wait to get older and become addicted. They're all just humans. We gotta remember that. Loved ones should practice their own self-care when supporting a loved one during end of life with addiction. Don't lose yourself in trying to save every little bit of what's left. You have to take care of yourself all the way. And here's just some resources where you can turn. prevention is key, as Maurice said. You know, it's good to start at the bottom. So if you have kids that have been growing up in an environment with drugs and alcohol, you want to try to prevent them from going into that same addiction cycle. So there's tips on how to talk to kids about drugs, and all kinds of good information on Drug Free Kids Canada, and support groups for families. Like I said, Al-Anon. There is AA for the individuals suffering from alcoholism. Mind you, at the point of end of life, they likely wouldn't be going there, but addiction for sure. And support groups for people abusing narcotics. There's NA, Narcotics Anonymous. And then there's resources for addiction and mental health support of all kinds at camh.ca, Canadian Addiction and Mental Health. And resources, support, and tools for palliative care. You can find all sorts of resources and really good information on Ontario Palliative Care Networks.ca. These are all really good places to turn if you're looking for any kind of help dealing with any kind of addiction or end of life care, mental health care as well. And I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your presentation and all of your work on this. If anyone has any questions, they can put them in the chat now, or you can email me, bereavement@nnpcn.com, or you can call our office as well. Francine says, great presentation. Allison said, well done, thank you. So yeah, thank you guys for your time, and have a good rest of your day. Bye.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Bye.